Hello and welcome back to Toadstool Tarot. We're a couple days away from 2020, and it's got me reflecting not only on the past year, or even the past decade, but the past 20 years. I remember it seemed like it would be forever until the year 2000 arrived. And now, that's come and gone by 20 years. Where do those 20 years go? I've had a tarot deck or two for quite a while, and over the last 10 years, I accumulated maybe 20 or so until I started my channel 6 months ago. Since then, I haven't done a count, but I'm probably approaching 50 decks. And we're just now going into a new score with 2020 and the next 20 years. But I thought, even though I've done 3 or 4 top favorites in different categories over the last 6 months, the end of the year is usually time to reflect, and I decided my favorites have changed a couple of times since I started, as I'm sure they have with all of you over the past few months, over the past year, over the past few years, over the past decade. We move on, new decks come along, our tastes change, our interests change. So I'm going to share with you my top favorites of the moment. And these are not just decks that came out in the last year, but ones that have been around for quite a while, more than 20 years, for just a year, for just a month or less. But these are my top favorites in reverse order. At number 5, the Royal Fez Moroccan Tarot, an out-of-print deck that I fell prey to through other people's walkthroughs, and the most I've ever spent on a deck, an out-of-print deck. I didn't used to buy either indie decks or out-of-print decks. Now that I'm part of this community, I do. I thought I'd show you some of the lovely cards from this deck. It is distilled to just the finest elements. Beautiful fine line drawings in black and white from the 1950s, and only the very smallest handful of primary colors to accent the actions. With tax and shipping, I spent about $195 on this deck through eBay. I'm glad I have it, though. It's a treasure in my collection, even if it's in 5th place. At the moment, that could change. It could go higher or lower, or drop off my list entirely the next time I do a best of. But for right now, I consider it a treasure to have and to behold. I'm so glad I found this deck. And it was due to a couple members of our community that I found it, through their shares. So that's number 5, 5th place, the Royal Fez Moroccan Tarot. In 4th place, the John Waterhouse Oracle deck. This comes with a choice of 8 different backings that you can order, and I chose this one, which is a close-up of, if I can find it quickly, yes, it's a kaleidoscopic close-up of this image out of the deck. I think you can probably make that out. Can't go back far enough for you to see. There you go. These I loved because it's an entirely intuitive oracle deck with no labels, no numbers, no guidebook. Entirely paintings or painting details from the paintings of John Waterhouse during the late 1800s. Some of them are very indicative of sort of Greek Roman legend. Others are very much akin to British gardens and delicate ladies and lords. Some flew right out of my hand. Some of them are familiar images. And in my hectic world in New York City, some of them bring me great peace from time to time, to just bring these cards out and have a look. I particularly like this card. I think it's my favorite card in the deck. This is a great one to take to a cafe and daydream out the window and have a coffee or a tea and contemplate my cards. That is the John Waterhouse Oracle. There are a couple available. This one is 78. I think it's actually more cards than 78. Might be 80 something. Cards through Tarot by 7, I believe on Etsy. In 3rd place, this is one of my most recent purchases. I had ordered this just prior, I think, to, I pre-ordered it just prior to starting my channel over 6 months ago. And this is the Abandoned Oracle of Patrick Valenza. People love and hate Patrick Valenza. depending on your point of view. I have often found myself at odds with his beautiful, dark, comic artwork because the decks weren't always the easiest for me, particularly to work with. And some of that had to do with the imagery, and some of it had to do with the size. Some of the decks were too large, others were too small, but I find this one to be just right. I love the images. I don't usually like labels, but I love the labels on these. They're very simple, one-word keywords, key phrases, suggestive phrases, descriptive phrases that don't tell you very much. I mean, this one needn't even be called the bird. You'd probably get that just by looking at it, but I particularly like not only the art style, but the color palette of this deck. Now I think we shall steal away to number 2. I do so wish that this came in a tuck box. I mean a 2-part box, not a tuck box. But, you know, oh, see, it's already getting dinged on the edge because of the tuck. I don't like that, but, you know, my only other option is to stick it in a tin, which I have done with some of my other decks. But the box, I do like this part of the box more so than that part of the box. So number 2 in my top of the deck, top 5 of the decade, number 2 is The White Witch Tarot by Maya Taoist. This one is not for everyone, just as Patrick's decks are not for everyone. It does come in a lovely magnetic box with a little book, and the cards are about the same height as tarot cards, perhaps a little shorter but a little wider. They're highly glossy. They're almost like patent leather shoes. And the images are done like scratchboard on black. They're like light beings coming out of the darkness. I absolutely love them. They're not an easy read for most people, and I find them psychologically challenging to me, yet I always seem to find something in these images that fits my query. They also have gold edges, which means a lot to some people. And it's a majors only deck, and I often find majors only decks difficult to shuffle too thin. This one, because of the nature of the cards and the gold edging and the thickness of the cards, actually works. Of course, I overhand shuffle. I don't riffle shuffle. I apologize for the reflection on these. That's just the way they are. When they're in front of you and you don't have a light right on them, you don't get this glare, but they are like holding little works of enamels in front of you, little works of art. I love how the light energy of these beings radiates beyond dimension and through these cards. Illumination out of the darkness. You really have to dig deep to read these cards, I think. They are rather surreal, but filled with meaning. So that's the number 2 spot. And no surprise to many who follow me, remaining in the number 1 spot is the RWS 2.0. Now, in the past, I have had the Rider-Waite Centennial deck in a tin as my number 1. Somehow I think Pixie's art and imagery will always be in my top 5, if not my top number 1. But this deck in particular, not only the coloration, but the definition and the line work is still the sharpest I have ever seen. I'm still finding and seeing little details in these cards that I hadn't noticed previously in other variations on this deck. They feel really wonderful in your hands, and they look glorious. And so this brings me back to the beginnings of my tarot journey. And my reflections back on 2019, the teens, the last 20 years, the last 67 years of my life. The year 2000 started when I was 47. I'm now 67. Where did the time go? Anyway, I wish you all well in the coming year. I hope we all do better and enjoy better and find decks that we love and continue to love and share them with others and spread goodwill. And until after the new year, probably. Goodbye, and thanks for stopping by.